At T-Mobile, our critical mission is providing unparalleled 5G coverage for when connectivity is mission critical. Introducing T-Priority, America's best 5G network experience for first responders, even in times of congestion. More capacity, faster speeds, better coverage. T-Priority from T-Mobile, built for tomorrow's emergencies, ready today. Discover more at t-priority.com.
For qualifying organizations on eligible rate plans, coverage not available in some areas and may be impacted by emergencies.
Are you a fan of spine-chilling tales of the unexplained? If so, get ready for an exciting new podcast experience, Chillers and Thrillers. Immerse yourself in the world of the paranormal as I, your host, narrate true stories about people's hair-raising encounters with ghosts, demons, and other eerie phenomena. In Chillers and Thrillers, I'm dedicated to bringing you authentic, bone-chilling accounts without any comedic elements or skepticism. So dim the lights, leave your skepticism behind, and settle in comfortably for our bi-monthly episodes, available on your favorite podcast platforms.
Thanks for listening to the Red Treehouse, where I tell scary stories to keep you up at night. You can listen to the Red Treehouse on your favorite streaming platforms, including Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Be sure to follow, like, and subscribe. Oh, and leave a 5-star review. You can follow the Red Treehouse on social media, on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, X, Threads, and Facebook at Red Treehouse Pod. And now, you can find the Red Treehouse on Patreon. Join the Red Treehouse community for as little as $3 per month and receive exclusive member benefits. Simply go to patreon.com/Red Treehouse. As always, if you have a scary story or topic you'd like me to feature on an upcoming episode, email redtreehousepod@gmail.com. Important note: sources for this episode can be found in the show notes. The Red Treehouse is dedicated to my dad. I love you, Pop. It's been a while since we've covered a true crime case. And recently, while reading and researching, I came across a case that I'd never heard of before. A case that also might be one of the scariest and most disturbing in recent memory. The story takes place in the small village of Clemens, a suburb just outside of Winston-Salem, North Carolina. In a regular, ordinary house, in a regular, ordinary residential neighborhood like you or I might live in. And it's possible the home may have been a literal hell on earth. It's been called the House of Horrors, with a real-life devil in the flesh named Pazuzu Algarad. The story of Pazuzu Algarad is truly wild and involves substance use, his version of an ancient religion, a to hell with everyone and everything attitude, and murder. And it's possible he may have been a serial killer. Speculation aside, we know for certain he is responsible for the tragic deaths of at least 2 individuals, Joseph Wetzler and Tommy Dean Welch. In this episode of the Red Treehouse, we're going to explore the terrifying case of Pazuzu Algarad and the tragedies that unfolded at his hands. What compelled him to commit these horrible crimes? And could they have been prevented? I'll share the story. You decide for yourself. I'm your host, Will. Welcome to the Red Treehouse. Before we get started, I want to offer a few comments. Research for this episode was unusually difficult, if only because many of the articles I read offered inconsistent information, changing dates, timelines, and claims. Initially, I was going to offer various perspectives and viewpoints, but found this confusing at best. When I say, I'll tell you the story, you decide for yourself. Deciding what you believe is predicated on my telling the story as accurately as I can. And as I was writing this episode, I wasn't confident in the articles I'd read. That is, until I found a 2010 forensic psychiatric evaluation completed on Pazuzu Algarad. An evaluation which includes his self-report on various details and his mother's report, and sometimes clarification, on certain things that he shared. So, rather than speculate and run the risk of approaching this story like a tabloid, I'm going to start by reading portions of the forensic psychiatric evaluation and work from there. An important note: the evaluation is public record and states as much in the first page under the heading Admission Mental Status. You can find a link to the evaluation in the show notes. Quote, unless otherwise indicated, the information obtained here was obtained from Mr. Algarad, whose reliability as a historian of general autobiographical detail is uncertain. He was born on 12/8/1978 in California to unmarried parents. He has never met his father, and he has an older half-sister whom he has also never met. He otherwise has no siblings, and he was raised primarily by his mother and her relatives. Mr. Algarad stated that he grew up in a poor, small-town environment, moving to North Carolina when he was in his teens. He denied having ever been abused or neglected as a child. He was unaware of any family history of mental illness. He did recall having an uncle who had problems with substance abuse and who had legal problems arising from his use of alcohol and drugs, but he was otherwise unaware of any family history of substance abuse or legal difficulties. End quote. Further into the evaluation, Pazuzu's mother provided additional information and clarity, and in some places seemingly contradicted his self-report. Quote, telephone contact with Mr. Algarad's mother, Cynthia James, provided additional information. She noted that her son had been born John Alexander Lawson, but had legally changed his name. She indicated that she is not actually his guardian, but is rather the payee for his disability check, received because of his problems with phobias. She said that he was the product of a normal pregnancy and delivery, born to married parents. The family moved to North Carolina when he was around 2 years old, and Mr. Algarad's parents separated when he was around 8 years old. His mother stated that her ex-husband had problems with alcohol and later drugs, was in and out of jail, and never paid support to them. She remarried when Mr. Algarad was around 12, but he and her new husband were unable to get along, and that marriage eventually ended. End quote. John Alexander Lawson was born in December 1978 in San Francisco, California, to Cynthia and Timothy Lawson. Sometime around John's second birthday, the family moved to Forsyth County, North Carolina, an area the couple was familiar with. For a few years, the family lived normally, but eventually, the couple divorced, and John's father moved back to California. Almost immediately, his relationship with his father ended. After Cynthia remarried, the family moved to Clemens, a small village in southwest Forsyth County, less than a 15-mile drive from downtown Winston-Salem. Unfortunately, the new marriage didn't last long. John struggled in school, often failing classes and dropping out in the 9th grade. Quote, Mr. Algarad stated that he left school in the 9th grade because that's when the phobia around people started. In general, he was a poor student, typically making Fs, and he endorsed having been in special education classes because of learning problems. He had to repeat both the 2nd and 9th grade, while he denied having ever been skipped over any grades at school. At times, he got in trouble for skipping class, but he denied other sorts of behavioral problems, such as getting into frequent fights, being verbally disrespectful to teachers, or engaging in vandalism. He stated that he was suspended once, while he denied having ever been expelled from school. End quote. Pazuzu's mother offered additional information, corroborating Pazuzu's account. Quote, Mr. Algarad was in LD classes in school because of problems with mathematics. He started developing problems with phobias when he was around 16. End quote. An important note. 9th grade students are typically 14 or 15 years old. However, John's claim to have dropped out in 9th grade because of phobias around people, and his mother's statement the phobias began at 16 years old, are congruent, because John was held back in 2nd and 9th grade, likely making him 16 years old, and in 9th grade, when he dropped out. Unfortunately, as John navigated the stressors in his life, he turned to alcohol as a coping mechanism. Quote, Mr. Algarad reported a history of significant substance use. Although he strongly denied any history of using illegal or recreational drugs, he admitted to regular use of alcohol, starting at age 13. Typically, he would consume a 12-pack of beer daily, which he said just calms me down. He last used alcohol the day before his admission to the hospital. He admitted that at times he gets the shakes if he stops drinking for an extended period of time, but he denied any other history of problems related to his use of alcohol. End quote. Pazuzu's mother offered additional information, corroborating his account. Quote, he began drinking in his early teens. His mother was unaware of his having any problems with drug use. End quote. John struggled with his mental health for much of his life. Quote, Mr. Algarad provided contradictory information when asked his history of mental health care. He initially stated that he first received mental health treatment when he was around 26, because that's when the agoraphobia started kicking in pretty strong. He later acknowledged, however, having been involved in Daymark recovery services a few years before, dropping out of treatment when after around a year because of transportation issues. While in treatment at Daymark, he was prescribed Zoloft, Seroquel, and one other medicine, but he said he did not like them because they make me feel like a zombie. Still later in the hospitalization, he reported having been hospitalized for mental health care when he was around 13, having been sent there by his mother because of getting into trouble. He said that he had been diagnosed in the past with agoraphobia, schizophrenia. As well, he reported a diagnosis of manic depression. End quote. His mother confirmed he, quote, has received mental health treatment in the past, but is not currently taking any medications. End quote. By the time John was in his mid-20s, his appearance, behavior, and name had changed. He changed his hairstyle and dress, began getting tattoos all over his face and body, and changed his legal name from John Alexander Lawson to Pazuzu Isla Algarad. According to Britannica, Pazuzu was a Mesopotamian demon who was the king of wind demons. Archaeological evidence of Pazuzu dates to the 8th century BCE, and while Pazuzu may have ancient roots, he is best known as the demon that possesses Regan McNeil in the horror classic, The Exorcist. The surname, Isla Algarad, means the Lord of the Locusts in Arabic. From here on out, I'll refer to John as Pazuzu. From a distance, the ranch-style home on Nob Hill Drive is much like any other in the surrounding neighborhood. But upon closer examination, it becomes obvious that something is off. First, there's a strong smell emanating from behind the walls, leaking out into the front yard. A combination of human excrement, rotten food and trash, and decaying animals. The front door, painted black, is covered in various symbols, including an upside-down cross, a sticker stating "Evil will triumph," and a note, seemingly directed towards law enforcement, that read, quote, "No gang members allowed. Anyone that dresses the same, has the same badge, and call themselves the authority of a land they did not create, they only seize through terrorism, has no permission to enter this land, unless you are a native, since this is their land. Since this is the First Amendment of your fake laws, for we see you are guilty until proven innocent. If you can make laws, so can we. So be it." End quote. The inside of the home is shocking. A Fox 2 Now article stated, quote, "The rooms and hallways inside Algarad's home are blanketed in trash and animal carcasses. The walls are spray painted in graffiti, covered in mold, and lined with hundreds of satanic photos and drawings. The excrement on the floor might have been both animal and human. Walking into the house, trying not to step in excrement, filthy dishes piled up with bugs crawling all over them." End quote. Photos of the home offer proof that eyewitnesses are not exaggerating. Every room, including the kitchen, bedrooms, and bathroom, are covered in graffiti, pictures, strange symbols, and trash. At least a few of the rooms had mountains of trash piled so high it looked near impossible to walk through. It seems hard to believe anyone could live in these conditions. For those who knew Pazuzu best, they believed his change in appearance and behavior was intentional. One article stated, quote, "Pazuzu had done everything he could to make himself seem scary to the people in town. He was trying to freak people out." End quote. He claimed to belong to an ancient Sumerian religion that required animal sacrifices. He covered his body in a variety of tattoos, including the word Satan across the underside of his right forearm. He filed down his teeth to sharp points. It seemed Pazuzu wanted to create a certain mythos around himself, one that was very different than the religious and political conservatism in Forsyth County. It's also likely Pazuzu's rejection of the status quo and rebellion from societal norms attracted others to him. One article stated, he, quote, "began to attract a mixed-gender group of locals described as working class, the working poor, and otherwise disenfranchised people. He had a twisted sort of charisma. It's the kind of charisma that isn't going to appeal to everyone. But certain minds are going to be drawn in by that. The misfits, the outcasts, people living on the edge, or people who wanted to live on the edge." End quote. Those drawn to Pazuzu were inevitably welcomed into his home, which was described as, quote, "lawless, chaotic, filled with sexual promiscuity, and totally filthy." End quote. He eschewed all rules and constraints, instead opting for a type of anarchy and hedonism. Quote, "People would come visit his house because they knew it was free reign. There was no rules. There was nothing you had to abide by. You could piss in his carpet. You could smash a TV. You could hit somebody in the head with a beer bottle. You could throw a knife at his wall. It just didn't matter." End quote. An Investigation Discovery article stated, quote, "Specific claims about Algarad's alleged behaviors included cutting himself and his buddies, drinking the blood of birds, doing copious drugs, performing ritual sacrifices of rabbits, staging nude orgies, and letting people do whatever they please to his abode." End quote. Part of Pazuzu's lifestyle included a combination of religious practices. Though many considered him a Satanist, that doesn't appear to be the case. In fact, the official Church of Satan has worked hard to distance themselves from him. The forensic psychiatric evaluation stated, quote, "Mr. Algarad reported that he practices a Sumerian religion, having been an adherent of it ever since he was 17. He later acknowledged that he and his wife are the only ones who practice this religion. But he said that he learned of its rites and beliefs while going through a 5-year shamanistic journey. At the time of his admission, he expressed a great concern because every month he had to perform a specific ritual during the black moon, which was supposed to occur in another day or so." End quote. His mother confirmed Pazuzu's claims, stating, quote, "He has been practicing the religion Tiamat for around 13 years, and his mother was convinced that if he was unable to make a sacrifice during the dark moon, he might try to kill himself." End quote. It is believed Pazuzu wanted to sacrifice an animal during the black or dark moon. Inevitably, as word spread of Pazuzu's behaviors, rumors began circulating that he'd killed people and buried them in his backyard. For his part, Pazuzu played into this, claiming he'd killed sex workers. According to Bianca Heath, a friend of Pazuzu's who stayed in the Nob Hill home for a month in 2005, he claimed to have killed 2 sex workers and ate them before burning the remains in a fire pit and burying them afterwards. A HuffPost article containing an interview with Bianca Heath stated, quote, "Paz told everyone, but I never believed him. I'm sure no one else believed him either. He laughed about the skeletal remains when telling the story on why he did what he did. I never once saw the skeleton bodies. I honestly thought he was lying. Now I'm not so sure what to believe." End quote. Another friend claimed to have heard Pazuzu, quote, "boast of killing sex workers." End quote. It's obvious those closest to Pazuzu didn't take his claims of murder seriously. It's likely we will never know if they dismissed his claims because they didn't believe he was capable of committing murder, because they thought he was joking, or because they were trying to protect themselves. Here's what we do know. Sometime between July and October 2009, Pazuzu murdered one person and was an accessory to the murder of another, 36-year-old Tommy Dean Welch and 37-year-old Joshua Frederick Wetzler. A Fox 8 article detailed the murder of Joshua Wetzler as follows, as recounted by Pazuzu's mother. She stated she believed Pazuzu had taken drugs and alcohol prior to him walking into the house one morning. At some point, she came out of her bedroom and asked what he was doing. She watched as Pazuzu stood there holding a rifle. The body of Joshua Wetzler on the ground. She recalled not knowing what to do about the situation and walked back to her bedroom to consider her options. She chose to go to work and do nothing. By the time she returned later that day, Pazuzu and others had moved the body of Joshua Wetzler to the basement. Again, she went to her bedroom and did nothing. A short time after the murder, in August 2009, a woman named Tarina Billings called the local sheriff's office and told them her father had seen a body in the basement of Pazuzu Algarad's home, and he helped him bury the body in the backyard. Investigators reached out to Ellen Billings, who denied burying the body. But he did say Pazuzu had admitted to killing someone. With that information in hand, an investigator met Pazuzu Algarad at his home, where he was shown around, including the backyard. Seeing nothing, he left. In the months that followed, several more tips came in. In October 2009, Pazuzu's mother observed a situation similar to the one from a few months before. This time, she heard gunshots, and when she walked out of her bedroom, Amber Birch, Pazuzu's live-in girlfriend, told her to go back to her room. She'd shot and killed Tommy Dean Welch, who, quote, was slumped over on the couch in their home, end quote. One article stated, quote, Birch was believed to have killed a second male victim in October of 2009, and Algarad is believed to have helped bury this victim in the same backyard, end quote. 2010, Pazuzu was arrested and convicted of assault, perpetrated against his mother. He was also convicted, quote, on a charge of accessory after the fact in the shooting death of 30-year-old Joseph Chandler, whose body was discovered near a river by police, end quote. He was released on probation shortly after. In late 2011, Cynthia, Pazuzu's mother, went to the sheriff's office and informed them she'd heard a gunshot and saw Amber Birch holding a rifle. However, when sheriff's deputies stated they needed to speak with Pazuzu, she stopped cooperating. It would be another 3 long years before anything else came to light. In September 2014, deputies received a series of tips that led to a woman named Dixie Ross. When questioned, she reported receiving a text in October 2009 from Amber Birch to come to the house on Nob Hill Drive. When she arrived, Birch told her about the killing of Tommy Dean Welch. Scared, she helped Birch dig the hole where Welch's body would later be found. Within a few days of questioning Dixie Ross, deputies secured a warrant for Pazuzu Algarad's home. Nearly 5 years to the day, on October 5, 2014, the bodies of Joshua Wetzler and Tommy Dean Welch were discovered in the backyard of Pazuzu Algarad's home. Both Pazuzu and Amber Birch were arrested and charged with 1 count of murder and accessory after the fact, and placed in the Forsyth County Detention Center with no bond. A third woman, Crystal Matlock, was charged with conspiracy to accessory after the fact to first-degree murder for helping to bury Joseph Wetzler in July 2009. One article stated, quote, Birch's warrant said that she killed an unidentified male and with the help of Algarad buried the body in the backyard sometime between October 2nd and 5th of 2009, end quote. 6 months later, on April 24th, 2015, the home on Nob Hill Drive, dubbed the House of Horrors, was torn down brick by brick. 6 months after that, On October 26, 2015, Pazuzu Algarad sent his mother a letter from Central Prison in Raleigh, where he'd been transferred after attempting to commit suicide in the Forsyth County Detention Center. The letter read, quote, "Mom, Shakamuku, I'm so bored. Got a letter from you and one from Amber. I despise the human race. People are ugly and pointless creatures. I sit back and watch them, and they anger me. I should get a medal for murdering those stupid fucks. Maybe when I'm dead, the gods of chaos shall grant me the power. So how's things your way? When are you and Kim coming to see me again? Well, I'm hungry and tired, so I'll write you again here soon. I love you." End quote. 2 days later, on October 28, 2015, Pazuzu Algarad was found dead in his cell. He'd cut deep into his left arm. His death was ruled a suicide. On March 9, 2017, Amber Burge pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, armed robbery, and accessory after the fact to murder. She was sentenced to 30 to 40 years in prison and is scheduled to be released in May 2045. On June 5, 2017, Crystal Matlock pleaded guilty to a lesser charge of conspiracy to accessory and was sentenced to 3 years and 2 months to 4 years and 10 months in prison. She was released in May 2018, but has been in and out of prison in the years since. Whenever I narrate a true crime case, there's a real tension between telling the story and humanizing the victims. It's far too easy to emphasize the details of the crimes and the perpetrators and lose sight of the individuals whose lives were lost. The 2 men who lost their lives were Tommy Dean Welch and Joseph Wetzler. This is their story. In July 2009, Joseph Wetzler fell victim to Pazuzu Algarad, but he was more than a victim. According to Stacy Carter, Wetzler's ex-girlfriend, quote, "He was a doting father who loved his son," end quote. The 2 met at a music festival and discovered they had similar hobbies. In 2002, the couple moved in together and worked towards their joint dream of owning a horse farm. Soon after their son was born, though, the couple split up. Shortly after, Wetzler fell into some legal trouble after he was caught with psychedelic mushrooms. He was eventually placed on probation. A Salisbury Post article containing an interview with Stacy stated, quote, "He was a wonderful dad and a super nice guy. He couldn't be put into a box, was very outspoken, and very much into animal welfare," end quote. Carter last saw Joshua in 2009 during a Renaissance festival. When she didn't see or hear from him after a while, she assumed he'd violated his probation and left the area. The reality was far more tragic. Like the family of Tommy Dean Welch, Joshua Wetzler's family would go 5 years before hearing anything about his whereabouts. The pain of assuming he'd abandoned his family turned to horror as a new nightmare set in. For those left behind, questions about Wetzler's connection to Pazuzu Algarad remain. On the night of October 3, 2009, Tommy Dean Welch was planning to have a family night. A Fox 8 article containing an interview with Carrie Price, Tommy's sister-in-law, stated, quote, "We gave hugs and said we will be back later and we will watch a movie, get us some pizza. Once the kids went to bed, that was our plan," end quote. Sometime after Carrie left their home in Clemens, Tommy walked a short distance to his house and said he would be right back. Except, he never returned. For 5 long years, the family waited for Tommy to return. They were surprised to learn his remains were discovered a few blocks from their former home. The family is still uncertain of the connection between Tommy and Pazuzu, stating, quote, "He was about family. He wouldn't be into the things they were into. He wasn't into drugs. He wasn't into partying. Just family mainly." End quote. I'll admit, this was a tough case to research and tell. Not because information is scarce, but because it focuses on the more sensational aspects of Pazuzu Algarad's life and crimes. I'll admit something else. Unusual stories like this can create a sort of rubbernecking, where we focus on the most outrageous details and forget about the real human lives who were lost. The descent of Pazuzu Algarad into mayhem and murder saddens me. His forensic psychiatric evaluation tells the story of a young man searching for answers and trying to cope with significant mental health struggles, and self-medicating with alcohol and/or drugs is a situation I've seen far too often. And as confusing as his lifestyle choices were to many others, as an adult consorting with other consenting adults, he had that right. But, and this is important, none of these is an excuse or license to commit murder or participate in covering up murder. By crossing that line, Pazuzu Algarad went from social outcast and eccentric rebel to murderer and possible serial killer. And that should never be justified or defended. Because on the other side of evil actions were 2 innocent men, Tommy Dean Welch and Joshua Wetzler. That their lives were taken is both senseless and tragic. These men had hopes and dreams, family and friends. Their lives mattered. Their story matters. As we close this episode of the Red Treehouse, we're left with these lingering questions. What compelled Pazuzu Algarad to commit these horrible crimes? And could they have been prevented? I've shared the story. Now you decide for yourself. I'm your host, Will. Thanks for joining me in the Red Treehouse.